Chapter. Okay. Fun. Also, I might be going to an anime convention this weekend, or at the very least, a convention this weekend where there are people who will be talking who have been in anime. Specifically, the guy who voices Crocodile and the guy who voices Mihawk. So that'll be fun, and they're doing a panel. So, yay! I get to go to this. And it's free. Yeah, I'll probably still have to pay if I want any autographs and merchandise and stuff like that, but at the very least, admission is free, which is nice. That'll be my upcoming weekend. But before that, chapter. Okay, so we have chapter 1136, titled "The Country That Awaits the Sun," or at least that's one of the translations. So we start off with back to the Yamato cover story, where Yamato is currently dealing with Hold'em. Speed seems to be better. Komichio has arrived, and Tama is riding on Speed's back as they seem to have been led back to, I guess, Hold'em's lair, and it's just like a mysterious hidden base in Udon is what the caption says. So it's like, seems to be this hidden base, hidden lair, or whatever that maybe Hold'em made. If he did, his construction skills aren't bad. He definitely did well on that. But there could be some other, gifters here and such who are, who did not fall under Tama's control, or who didn't end up witnessing what happened at Onigashima with like Chopper and stuff like that. In regards to like the pleasures and the waiters and stuff like that, who Chopper saved. And then whose like allegiance is kind of shifted after that. After Queen's Isoni virus. So there's that. We see them, and I guess Hold'em is a fan of Who's Who, because the top of the building looks like Who's Who's helmet/head, cat fangs and all, which is funny because I've recorded a video recently where I talk about Who's Who a little bit. In comparison to one of the devil fruits that I designed, but that won't be up for a little bit. But going into the story, so we basically start off where we left off last time. They're at the big banquet going on right now, the big party feast going on in the giant village with, Jarl, whichever one it is, the elder has shown up, and Luffy is just chowing down on the moose meat, and he's like, "It's so tasty. It reminds me of dinosaur meat." I'm like, by a technicality, it is dinosaur meat, Luffy, but you didn't see the moose, so we'll leave it at that. You didn't really see the moose, so we'll leave it at that. I don't know. I love all the Strong World animals popping up here. I love Strong World is the movie that got me back into One Piece. Really majorly got me back into One Piece, so I really like that there's like Strong World references going on here, and that the shadowy figure might be, Shiki. Should be fun. There's another shadowy figure in this who might be Shanks, but that's a different story. That's for the end of the chapter. So Jarl is talking to Luffy, and he's like, Luffy's sitting on the plate munching down on meat, and Jarl's just like, Jarl, whichever, is holding the plate and talking to Luffy, and it's like, they're quite tricky to catch, as ferocious as they are delicious. And then Stanton and Hyrule are like, no task is too great if it's for one's savior. So they're just eating, and Hyrule just has like, he has a steak, and it's just on like a dagger, and he's probably just gonna like, as he eats away at it, which is funny. We see a bunch of other giants in the background, and Oda's messing with scale here, because yeah, Jarl and Jarl were very, very tall. I don't think they were this tall compared to Hyrule. Should be this tall compared to Hyrule, but that's what we're getting here. And Dorian Broggy was very big compared to Broggy in the last chapter, so I don't know exactly what's going on with that. But Luffy's like, and I appreciated Hyrule and Stanton, and they're just like, really glad you like it. So it's just like, they're just happy. And then Jarl, whichever, is, I can't remember which one was which. I think he's Lord Mountainbeard is the one that he is. It's just like, it's rare for humans to make it all the way to the Sun Realm. Most confuse the underworld for Elbath proper and flee before they find their way up here. Well, yeah, it's not like you have signs up. It's not like you have a sign up that says, okay, do not go past this part unless you are ready to deal with the underworld part of Elbath. If you want to go talk to the friendly giants, go get on the Rainbow Bridge over there and take it up one layer to where it's nice and less mountainy and less snowy. And go up there. Ask at the tavern on the coast. There has to be more than one tavern on that damn coast. That coast is freaking huge. There has to be more than one tavern around the outside of that coast for if people show up. It's like, yeah, no, don't go that way. Go over to the Rainbow Bridge. They'll help you get up to the get up to the Sun Realm. That's where most of the giants are. They're nice. Just, be careful that they don't step on you. So that's a valid thing. And yeah, if I showed up at Elbath and I didn't know that the underworld area was Elbath proper, I'd be like, well, I'm leaving. It's like, I don't want anything to do with this giants and magical rainbows and flying and floating clouds and boats and everything else like that or not. I am not dealing with this crap all over the place with all of these animals. I am not dealing with this. So yeah, I don't blame people for that. Also, it depends on who you are. Shanks has definitely figured this all out. Maybe Roger went to Elbath at some point in time. We don't know if Roger ever went to Elbath. So Big Mom would definitely know about this, given that she lived on Elbath for a good chunk of time when she was, a good chunk of her, when she was 5 going on 6, she would have lived here for a good chunk of time. So there's that. But they're just, so they're just talking, and Usopp is, I guess, he's being Usopp, and he's just like, I guess one of the giants is talking about Ors, and he's like, listen up, the mighty Ors was a warrior legendary even to you giants. He'd tower over any of you 3 times over, and guess who finally finished him? That's right, it was me! It's like, oh, Usopp, I love you. Yes, you were kind of part in finishing off Ors, but you didn't do it. First time around, it was his own stupidity and cold and hypothermia that killed him in the first place. Second time around, yes, you were part of it, and the fact that you kind of, helped build a giant slingshot to kind of, I don't remember if it was a giant slingshot to shoot the salt at Ors, or if the slingshot was also used to help, fire Luffy at Ors to help, just increase his power as he bulleted himself into Ors' stomach. Or if that was Moria. It's been a while since I've watched Thriller Bark. That's been a little while since I've watched Thriller Bark or read it. So you are involved in this, but you were not the one to finish him off. But sure, take the credit right now. And they're like, whoo, yay for Captain, way to go, Captain Usopp. And then we have a bunch of the giants that are getting really focused in on Jinbei and Brook, because, yes, out of the Straw Hats, and Frankie's not here right now. Frankie, Robin, and Chopper are still up at the library with Saul, which is fair. Frankie's at least near the tree, at the very least. He's more interested in the tree right now. And then, Robin and Chopper are currently in the library right now. I don't think we see Bonnie running around here. We do see Colin is running around here, but I don't think we see Bonnie at all in this chapter. She's mentioned because Luffy mentions her, because we're going to get on the subject of Nika in a little bit, and Luffy mentioned Bonnie, but I don't think Bonnie is here yet. Bonnie might still be up at the library with Robin, and stuff, because she might be interested in what's going on there, because that's where Lilith and Kuma, Kuma isn't there yet. I don't think we know where Kuma is at the moment. Kuma might still be on the Thousand Sunny, or on, well, not on the Thousand Sunny, but could be still on the Great Eric, but whatever. We'll see what's going on with that. But right now, the two kind of physically most interesting Straw Hats that are here are Jinbei and Brook. And as is going to be pointed out here, a lot of the giants who live on Elbath have actually never left Elbath. They've been living here their whole life. The main ones who have left are the ones who become pirates, or the ones, I guess, like Joe John Giant, who got trafficked and became a Marine, that type of a thing, because of Mother Carmel. But most of the other giants, like, they've heard about stuff because, like, the other giants who were pirates, Dorian Bragi's crew, Ormo and Kashi, Yorl and Yorl, way back when, Hyrudine and his crew showing up and, like, talking about their adventures and everything else like that. Any other ones that have gone out and become pirates, in intermeeting, in various intervals throughout the course of Elbaf. So they would have come back with, like, tales of, like, fishmen and merfolk and, long arms and long legs. Okay, how I'm gonna say wacky, more interesting of a character would there be in One Piece that somehow was like a combination of everything? Like, they're part giant, part fishman or merfolk, part long or part snake neck, part long leg and long arm, and bunch, like, all of these things. Like, how that would be a very interesting looking character. I don't know if that would be something Oda would ever go into, but that would be a very interesting character. And just throw in, like, third eye tribe from Pudding, to stick a third eye on their forehead, and then I don't know, Skype or Lunarian and give them wings or something like this. This seems like an experiment that the world government would try to do. It's just like, can we make a creature that's based on, it's like, York, make a seraphim that are based on, yep. Don't throw in whatever the heck Moria is. We don't need any more onion humans running around. But, like, whatever type of stuff like that. That would be very interesting. But so the giants are very interested in Jinbei, and it's just like, wow, your skin really is blue. And Jinbei is taking this in stride because, like, he knows that there's lots of humans out there who have not seen fishmen, and he's used to them, being fearful of the fishmen. And in this case, it's more just like they're intrigued. They're not insulting him or anything like that. They're just intrigued by him. And Jinbei is just like, oh, you should see the Fishman Island. There's as many skin tones as there are fish in the sea, which is very true. I wonder if that's a reference to the whole fact that right now they're doing the Fishman Island remaster arc right now. I wonder if that's a reference back to that. That's kind of funny if it is. If it's not, it's just like, well, Oda was going to throw this in here anyway, so whatever. And then one of the other giants is just like, I've always wanted to see a mermaid. And then we have Sanji showing up, and he's just like, no shame in that. He's just like pointing at the guy. He's like, there's no shame in that. They're a sight to behold. Mermaid Cove is more exciting, enticing than heaven itself. And then there's another giant that's just like, oh my god. And Sanji's like, that said, my heart soars just as much when I see giant ladies. Oh god, the Sanji, get help. So Sanji is just going into straight pervert mode as, like, he's like, leaping about, lots of pretty giant, giantesses are around him and everything, and they're just like, oh, Sanji-kun, you're so silly, it's cute. It's like, okay, yeah. Don't encourage him. Do not encourage him. There's some alternate world out here in One Piece, in canon, or not in canon, but there's some alternate world out there where Sanji is gay and he is just so not happy about this right now. He's trying to hit on the guy giants, which would be very funny. Or there's another one where it's like he's going down the path of, like, if Pudding had somehow gone with the Straw Hats, and he's like wanting to be better because of Pudding. And so he's trying really hard to not hit on the girl, so he's kind of pulling like a Finral from Black Clover, which, yes, I've read the newest Black Clover chapters, and yay. But it's like he's pulling a Finral when Finral is trying to do better so he can, be a better, be not as flirty and everything else like that with any pretty girl that walks by. So Sanji, and there's some point out there where Sanji's gonna have to go down that path, which is great in my opinion if that ever happens. But he's just like, woo, beauty's everywhere. I'm getting buried in babes. It's like, sure, Sanji, yeah, back it up a bit. And then we get to the ones who are more fascinated with Brook, and they're like, and what are you? And Brook's like, me? Who? Me? I can answer with my own blues, my what the heck am I ditty, yay! And he's gonna, like, pull out his guitar and start playing. I love you, Brook. Again, Brook is not insulted when people look at him and they're like, what exactly are you? You're a skeleton and you have an afro, and yet you're walking and talking and singing. So what are you? Various, fairly good question here. It's like a reasonable question. And one of the others is just like, I guess it's a big wide world out there. Let's toast to it. So they're happy. And then Zoro and Nami are kind of off to the side watching Brook interact with the Giants, which is nice. Again, it's like the Giants are not like being judgmental of Jinbei or Brook. They're like, well, you guys are stuff we haven't seen before, so what's all this about? And Nami and Zoro are like, Nami's like, I'm surprised so many Giants have never gone out to sea. And Zoro's like, yeah. And Nami's like, I kind of assumed they were all pirates. And then we get the jump scare panel, which I hope they kind of pull off this jump scare in the anime really well. Well enough. We have Road show up. Rodo, whatever you want to call him. Road shows up and he just like pops right into their face. And he is not in good shape. He's like, Namitasu, I want to apologize to you and this other dwaha about before, because he's just been punched or kicked or stepped on or whatever so many times by Gerd and Goldberg and electrocuted by Nami at least once and had a tree fall on him and everything. And Nami's kind of surprised, but Zoro's just like, like not interested in this guy at all. And I think it's Gerd pops up next to him and she's like, he ain't gonna be forgiven that easily, but beating a proper apology out of him was the least we could do. I love Gerd. He's great. Road also thinks Gerd is great, and he's thinking, Gerd Dazo's sadistic side really makes my heart flutter. Okay, Road, things I don't need to know about you, along with pretty much everything else that I have learned. The only thing that was vaguely interesting about you is you're a navigator, and apparently you know how to craft clothes and make really good D&D sets. Other than that, you need to worry about consent and learn more about that. And Zoro's just like, don't sweat it. It's not like anyone died. Okay, it's not like any of you guys died. There's a glutton bunny that got roasted, which is fair. It was an evil bunny. And there's a bunch of people who have lived in that little village in the diorama place that in the Stein Castle or whatever. Hopefully those people go and get released, although we might find out a little bit of information about who some of those people are in a little bit later in the chapter, or a possibility of who they are a bit later in the chapter. And it's just took a bit longer than I thought, but Brenda is now downstairs with my mom, so she'll probably be back up here in a little bit after she gets some of her treats for mom, but you know, you get the idea. So yeah, no, there were people who died. There were definitely human bones in that castle where Usopp and Nami were. So yeah, humans have died in this regard because of you. Not that Zoro technically knows about that, but we'll see what happens later. And Zoro's just like, he's just like drinking away on his you know, his mug of beer, and he's just like, although that's only because Usopp stopped me. If he didn't, it would have been your head. And he's just like glaring, doing his menacing glare that he does at Road, and Road's just like, oh god. Falls over from the table. Gerd is not bothered by this whatsoever. And they're just gonna keep laughing. Someone in the background is just laughing at Road, which is perfectly understandable. And one of the giant in the background is just like, don't tell me you picked a fight without checking their current bounties. You never stood a chance. Yeah, Nami beat you, and she's not the one with the lowest bounty because of, you know, Chopper, but she's got, you know, I mean, it's a high bounty, but compared to the other ones in the crew, it's one of the lowest ones between her and Usopp, but still. Yeah, Nami can take care of you quite easily. And then Gerd just like looks at Zoro, and she's like, don't hold back next time, in regards to like dealing with Road, which is fair. Zoro's probably gonna take her up on that. And then Gert, and then he Rhodes like, Gert Tasso. I like how he refers to her as Tasso, and I like the way that they have translated this for like the English for the official, I believe, is like ultra rare. So it's like ultra rare Gert, ultra rare Nami, ultra rare Luffy. It's like, are all of the girls that you know ultra rare? Like if you go and meet Ripley, is she's going to be Ripley Tasso or something like that? Like ultra rare Ripley, which is, I guess, technically applicable if she's, named after, the character from Alien. But you get the idea. So I'm not exactly sure where that's going. I don't know where that's going. But he's just like, she's so harsh, I can't get enough, is what he's thinking. And then Road is trying to defend himself, and he's like, come on, everybody born here on Elbas shares the same dream, to become the next sun god and rule the world. And this catches Zoro's attention. Sun god? And this results in, like, I guess this is going to result in an argument breaking out amongst the giants. And then it's just like, are you kidding me? The sun god isn't a ruler? That's right. He's the god of liberation. More like destruction. You're wrong. Everybody knows he was the god of laughter. And it's like, okay, you are all technically correct. The sun god is not a ruler. Luffy wants to be the king of the pirates, meaning he wants to be the freest man in the world. Nika may have been a representation of that. Roger, as like kind of this precursor to Luffy in regards to kind of filling this Joy Boy slot, but then also going to Joy Boy himself and his connection to Nika. Joy Boy was a pirate, so I don't know if he necessarily wanted to rule over anything, and he may just want to be like the same way of Luffy, as like be the freest man in the world, and that just still connected back to like the ancient kingdom in some shape or form. However that went. So there's that. But it's also, like, you go into the fact that he's the god of liberation. That is what he is referred to as the sun god, the god of liberation. That's what the Gorosei have referred to him as. That is what Who's Who refers to him as in that regard. That is what Kuma and Clap and like the others have all referred to him as, is like this god of liberation, this representation of like this hero that comes and frees the oppressed and those who either want to try to fight back but are unable to, or those who can't fight back for whatever reason. And Luffy has embodied that very well. That's what he literally just did on Wano. That's what he's done on many of the islands that he has been through. And I can hear Brenda's paws clicking as she's coming back. Are you back? Did you get your banana from Grandma? Yeah, I know. You got your banana, didn't you? You're a very good boo. You want to go back up on the bed? Here we go. There's the puppy. You're facing the wrong way. We can't see your face, but okay. But it's like, so it's this whole thing of like, Luffy is this embodiment of, the sun god Nika. And in that regard, he has now, he's, kind of subtly been like this, embodiment of this thing with like the god of liberation. But then you go, the next one's like more like destruction. That also is applicable. How many freaking things has Luffy destroyed over the years? Dressrosa is technically in shambles, not necessarily because of his actions entirely, but because of Doflamingo, but he left destruction in his wake. The same thing could be said for a lot of the other places they've been to. He destroyed the tombs in Alabasta in his fight with Crocodile, and then you look at Wano, and, Onigashima was just destroyed. Egghead, again, Luffy's image much more revealed to the world, is now being, has left this destruction in its wake in Egghead, and there was, him and Bonnie there, both representing, Nika. Not that Luffy knows that, and that'll get pointed out in a minute. But, so there's this destruction aspect there. Also, if you're someone who Luffy is fighting, which I love how they did this when they did Luffy versus Lucci, in regards to, like, how terrifying Luffy looks to his opponent at times when he's in his Gear 5th form. There is that moment that I love that they put in the fight with Lucci. And then you go into the, that you're kidding, everyone knows he was the god of laughter. Again, Luffy has loved laughing throughout the entire series. There have been multiple points throughout the entire series where even in dire straits, Luffy laughs. Again, this depends on what's going on. He's not really laughing all that much at Marineford. He's not laughing that much in Impel Down. But, like, at various points in time, through most of his battles, there are times where he is laughing. Or in between battles where he's laughing or there's jokes going on and he's enjoying it. And he brings smiles to the faces of the people who are around him. Also, just him in his Nika form is just really funny because of all the antics he can get up to, which is great. So it's like, yes, all of these giants are technically right. He's not a ruler. He's the god of liberation. He can bring destruction in his wake, and he is the god of laughter. So it's like all of them are technically right. It's like they're all technically right on some level, and that's something that's been pointed out for a little while in regards to the fan base. Is like, yeah, they're all technically right. But Luffy's like, it's getting rowdy. What's this all about? A god? And like we see all of the giants are just like starting to fight amongst each other, like bar brawls, and Rhodes kind of caught in the middle of it, which I'm fine with. What are the Jarl is talking. He's like, the sacred Harley text. I'm like, sure, bring Harley Quinn into this, whatever. I have Harley Quinn figurines in my other room, but they're not in here at the moment. I don't know if that's what's gonna. It's like Harley or Hallie, depending on what the translation is going to be, but Harley is what it says here. I was like, has been passed down for generations in Elbaf. The legends are written in an archaic language, so there have been countless interpretations. So again, this is the whole concept of like, that's kind of like, I mean, there is, okay, in world reference here, in regards to like this, like these texts that have been passed down for like generations throughout Elbaf in regards to Nika and the sun god and everything. And some of that's definitely predating like the Void Century and everything and the Great War and everything. And the Great Kingdom. Depending on how long the myths of Nika and everything have been around. But like he's like, yeah, there's been lots of interpretations from it, but since it's an archaic language, that means there can be various ways that stuff can be translated. And look at like just like the thing that I am reading off of right now in regards to One Piece. It's like there are, you know, there's the original, you know, Japanese version that gets put out. And then there is the fan translations that we get that like I tend to do the, you know, tend to do the reviews off of. But then on top of that, you also have ones that are the official translations, and there's fan translations into other languages, which then shifts some of the meanings around even more. And then there's stuff that's in the original Japanese that we can't pick up on because it's not something that is quite, you know, noticeable for a Western audience or for someone who's not speaking Japanese. And being able to pick up on like subtle inferences and stuff like that throughout the course of the story. And then if you want another example also from our world, look at the Bible. Look at how many different interpretations there have been of the Bible over the past, you know, 1600 years since it was, you know, canonized and everything by the Catholic Church. So many different translations and everything, particularly once it started being translated into other languages from Latin. So there's that. So that's kind of like a real world example of like kind of something that he is referring to. And also you look at like just like mythologies from around the world, and there's varying, you know, discrepancies from one to the next to the next to the next within the same mythology about the same story, or about like whose parents was whose, or whose, you know, spouse was whose, or what this god did or what that goddess did or whatever, shifts around from, you know, one telling to the next. So it's like that's not like an impossible thing to understand in regards to this. And Yorl is continuing. No one can say for sure which translation is accurate, and this is the result. Yeah. According to the Harley text, the world has already been destroyed twice before, and the name of the sun god Nika is involved after each instance, or invoked after each instance. Luffy's like, Nika? As like he's just like reaching for more meat. So again, this is, referring back to the fact that, Loki referred to the underworld as like the primordial world, the first world. And we don't know exactly how that lines up with like all the other islands and everything around One Piece, beyond the fact that, the sea levels have continued to rise over the past, at the very least, the past 800 years since the Void Century. We don't know where everything was, prior to that with the Great Kingdom, and then even before that, particularly if the world has been destroyed twice before. So twice before, the world has ended up in like a post-apocalyptic state, which is kind of the case that is going on right now in the One Piece world. Is it is technically in a post, apocalyptic state because of everything that happened with the Great Kingdom and the world government and the 20 kings and everything. They're in this like rebuilding phase because like so much information has been lost. And like our world has gone through different things like that. Like you look at like the Dark Ages in Europe and different things like that. Other points in time where just like whole societies collapsed and like a lot of that information was lost if it wasn't somehow, preserved by, scholars or whatever. And some of that information was really lost, and then other times it gets found again. So there's that. And Jarl is continuing, and he's like, you can say he was the world's savior. And we see this picture of Nika forming up that looks a little more Viking-like than what we saw with like Who's kind of like picture of Nika. And he's like, or the great destroyer who brought it crashing down. All we know for sure is that he heralds great change. That's why the rulers of the day always tend to fear Nika's return. And like, so this depiction of Nika, instead of like having like the spear in one hand and the sword in the other, this one has a sword in one hand, yes, but has like a Viking looking like round shield in the other. That is kind of reminiscent of like the cross that we saw in the Kuma's church, that has like, the 8 orbs around it, and like the one single orb in the middle. And like, he's got like the flowing, kind of cloud type stuff that we see with Luffy, and he's kind of wearing kind of a loincloth, I guess would be a way to put it. Yeah, there's images going around right now on Reddit right now of like comparing this image to an image that was on the ruins in Skypiea, that were the Shandian ruins in Skypiea, that show like a warrior vaguely resembling Nika fighting against what looks like the Yamato no Orochi, fighting that looks like the Hydra or something like that is a representation of like Orochi or something, even way back then. In regards to what we know for like when Shandora was built. So it's like, so that's kind of like, is that calling back to reference this? Is this referencing that? Is there, stuff connected there? And Luffy's like, Nika. That's the guy Bonnie mentioned. And he's just like, he's still, like, okay. Luffy is being fed, so he's fine with being told a story. Also, Luffy kind of likes stories anyway. He probably sat and listened to a lot of like Shanks' stories over the time frame when he was in Fuchsia Village and everything, because he wanted to hear about Shanks' adventures as a pirate and everything. So Luffy's fine with like sitting and listening to a story. It's like, I've stated this before. It's like Luffy in and of himself has like maybe 0.00001 interest in what the Void Century is, but the fact that it means something to Robin and that she would be the one telling him this story when they like finally get to, Laugh Tale, and they're reading like whatever the poneglyph language is as she's like translating the poneglyphs around them and telling them the story. Luffy will probably sit and listen to that, because Luffy has actually learned a bit more over the years to like, maybe it's a good idea to like sit and listen to someone's backstory. He has gotten better at it. He's not perfect, but he's better. Because like way back in East Blue, he didn't sit and listen to Nami's story when Nojiko was telling him about like her and Nami's childhood. Later on, when we get to Fishman Island, when Jinbei is telling the backstory about Fisher Tiger and Queen Otohime, Luffy is there and he's like half listening, but not fully paying attention. But then when you get to Wano, and when we have the scene where Kinemon is telling Luffy and his group about like Oden's life, Luffy is listening very intently to that. And he gets very angry on Oden's behalf for what happens there. So Luffy has gotten a lot better about listening to people when it comes to like their backstories and stuff like that, if they want to tell him their stories. And he may have like sat and listened to like some of the Straw Hats tell each other their own backstories or stuff like that a little bit more over the, since they've been reunited or whatever. He may have, sat and listened to some more of that information. Because it's important to people who are important to him. Therefore, it is at least a bit more important to him in this regard. So there's some of that going on there, I think, here. But like Luffy is like sitting and like listening to Jarl right now, which is just kind of funny in that regard. And Jarl is just like, yes, the sun god has become a symbol. Someone the hopeless and desperate turn to for salvation. They say Nika is adorned by white clouds with white hair and white clothes to boot, and he is said to have a contagious booming laughter, or a booming laugh. And Luffy's like, no wonder everyone keeps saying I look similar. It's like, well, yeah. And he's like, but I'm sure he's got nothing to do with me. Yeah, not at all, Luffy. Not at all. It's just a complete and utter coincidence. It's just a complete and utter coincidence that your fifth form, your freest form, looks very, very, very similar to the way that this god is described, and that when Bonnie goes into her Nika form, when she's like accessing that power within her, that she happens to also look very similar to what you look like and can access similar things to what you can do. Yeah, that's completely and utterly irrelevant. I love you, Luffy. Again, we don't know the full circumstances of this context in regards to like what the other Straw Hats are hearing from this, but we'll see. But Luffy is the main one that's being talked to right now. So it's like, he's given this information. Luffy has been given the information. He's just not even trying to connect the dots, which is funny. And then we have Hyrudian, Stanson, and Goldberg are there. Like, Hyrudian's got his arms around Goldberg and Stanson. And he's just like, don't be so dismissive, Straw Hat, Stanson says. And Hyrudian's like, you'd understand if you were born on Elbath. And Goldberg's like, we all look up to Nika. And it's just like, not to defend Roto, but he wasn't lying about us all sharing the same dream. So it's like, again, it's like, I don't like the guy, but I at least have to point out he was right about one thing at some point in his life. Type of a thing. And Luffy's like, And then Jarl goes off and he's like, Loki was the same. I believe his motive for Harold's murder was his attempt to follow in Nika's footsteps. And then someone shouting out in the background, nothing can justify what he did, Elder. It's like, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to point it out for his motive. And Luffy goes like, Loki. So he's a good guy? And then Hyrudian and a bunch of the other giants are like, no way in hell is he a good guy. We see like an old lady giant in there, which is kind of fun. No way in hell is he good. And they're like, he's the accursed prince. He's the accursed prince. There was a prophecy before Loki was born that foretold that King Harald would be slain by his own son. So we're going to get into a bunch of different listing here of like actions that Loki has done since he was born, or things that were blamed on Loki since he was born, or in the case of this prophecy, prior to his birth. And I'm going to point, I was trying to look up some different similarities to things throughout history, or it's like, this thing happened, so that's considered an omen or a bad omen or something like that. So I was trying to look up that information, and in some cases I wasn't finding much, unfortunately, because in a lot of cases it's just like, well, that's just generally a bad omen anyway, in regards to, certain things. Although in regards to the had a prophecy, where his son will kill him. I will point out in Greek mythology there is of course the story of Oedipus, um, Oedipus complex, take your pick, where the story or the myth is that like Oedipus's father had been given a vision, or that there was a prophecy that Oedipus would kill his own father and marry his own mother. To a degree, this ends up happening in the story. Oedipus doesn't know that he kills his own father, and he doesn't know that he marries his own mother until much later on. But it's the self-fulfilling prophecy because of the king's own actions that leads to it. It's kind of like the same thing with like what was the other one I was talking about? The Legend of Perseus, where it's just like, oh yeah, his grandfather was given a prophecy that like you will be killed by your own grandson, so he does everything in his power to prevent it, and he still gets killed by his own grandson, and his grandson doesn't even know that it's him. So there's that. So going through this, so we have the prophecy before he's even born. And they're like, then, shortly after his birth, the royal steed, the horse of fortune, died. I tried to find anything if there was like something that was like a horse dying as a bad omen, since horses, particularly in like the ancient world, were a very valuable commodity. And I couldn't really find much, so there wasn't much there that I could go off of. But I decided to look up, horses in Norse mythology, and yes, the big one that popped up was that there is Sleipnir, who is Odin's horse, his like 8-legged horse. In mythology, this horse is a child of Loki and another horse, because Loki's a shapeshifter, and the horse, Loki was the mayor in this setup, and he used his powers to seduce a male horse, and then he gave birth to a horse that had 8 legs, and then he gave it to Odin as a gift. Yep. Also, for reasons, I was looking stuff up, and I found that there is a bike rental company in Ecuador named after Sleipnir. And I'm like, why? Because, and I guess the logic behind it, from what I found when I was just reading through it, was this: Odin was a shaman, okay, because he could like see the future and commune and stuff like that with nature, and he's the All-Father and everything, so he was a shaman. So then this bike rental company is in Ecuador, and I guess there's a lot of shamans in Ecuador, and I guess it was like, well, the best, if there's a horse that is Odin's horse, then that means that that's the best horse for shamans. So if we have a bike company and we name it after Odin's horse because that's the bona fide or the best thing possible, then these bikes are based off, are named after Odin's horse because they're the best bikes for shamans. I didn't quite get it, but that was what I found, and I might try to put the link in the description. But I'm like, why is this a thing? I'm intrigued by it, but why is it a thing? So there's that. Continuing through, and there's lots of just different giants that are like pitching in for like everything that's gone wrong because of Loki, and it's just like, that was the same year that Linlin murdered the legendary hero Jorl. So again, we're getting a call back to that, which of course we knew that happened the same year that Loki was born. Same thing as Road and Goldberg and everything. And so there's lots of that stuff going on there. And it's just like, and the tragedies kept coming. A year later, the queen herself passed away. So the queen has passed. Given the reaction that one of the giants in the background is like crying over this, I'm assuming the queen was quite beloved as well. In that regard. And then it's just like, the princeling would go on to use his natural strength to make the realm, hold on. The princeling would go on to use his natural strength to make the realm of the dead his own personal playground. He killed many of those ferocious beasts and tamed the rest. He even released a few into the villages. Now, that's just horrible. That's just so horrible for like what Loki is doing there. Um, and I'm gonna point out something here because lots of similarities are being pointed out between like Luffy and Loki. Luffy, when him and Ace and Sabo were growing up, and then it was just him and Ace, they got into a lot of trouble and they caused a lot of mischief for Dodon and for like Whoop Slap and for Makino and everything. They caused a lot of problems. They weren't trying to release monsters into Fuchsia Village to kill anybody. They never did anything like that. Yeah, they were killing the animals in order to eat them, but they weren't like purposely trying to tame any of them at that point in time. None of them had had access to their Conqueror's Haki or anything like that. Ace technically did, but he never really used it beyond trying to save Luffy that one time, and he doesn't even know what he did when he was saving him from Blue Jam or whatever it was. Poor Chemi, whichever one, I don't remember. But it's like they caused a lot of problems, but not nearly on this scale where they're like terrorizing an entire kingdom. They kind of terrorized Fuchsia Village a little bit, but they did not terrorize an entire kingdom and everything. So there's that. Also, I was trying to see if there was anything that stated whether or not if like someone is born, like a prince or a princess is born, and then there's like a horrible natural disaster, if that was like ever blamed on the child or is like seen as like an omen for like that child's life. I figured there's probably some connection to that. I know that there's like connections in regards to like when a lot of people who were considered vampires, that like, oh, they died and then something horrible happened in the village, like there was a rock slide or there was like a fire or something like that, that like, oh, that person's a vampire, so let's stake them and make sure that they stay dead, type of a thing. I know that was a thing. I don't know how much of like natural disasters were necessarily caused on like newborns or stuff like that, so that's a question. And they're like, and this was all by the age of 10. It's like, Loki was a little terrible bastard, wasn't he? And it's just like, he was an arsonist. Loki's mischief endangered countless lives. Again, pointing back to Luffy, Ace, and Sabo, their mischief didn't endanger countless lives. It's not like, as I said, they weren't releasing monsters into Fuchsia Village or into, the Goa Kingdom, although that might have been a little bit more reasonable and acceptable to us fans, just for how horrible the Goa Kingdom was. They weren't trying to terrorize, they weren't trying to like kill the Dawn or the others or anything like that. And, they weren't setting fires to random things just to cause arson or whatever. Can we blame Loki for what's going on in California right now? Please? No, I didn't think so. But it's just like horrible stuff that is getting, this blame is getting put on Loki. To a degree, he is doing it by his own actions. And, he just sets fires that destroys everything. In both in Norse mythology and in Marvel, there are multiple times where Loki is just out playing pranks on other gods, other gods in Norse mythology, other gods and other heroes in Marvel and stuff like that. Playing tricks on Thor or tricks on Odin or tricks on Freya or tricks on the Avengers or whatever. And in some cases, it's just like, harmful fun or, it's fun and it's harmful. No one really got hurt. In other cases, it's very devastating. And sometimes Loki doesn't realize, where his stuff begins and ends for like when it's no longer entertaining, when it's actually very dangerous. And depending on what variation of Loki you're looking at, he doesn't effing care. He is like, I don't care that there's people getting hurt because this is just something that I find entertaining. And depending on stuff, this version of Loki that Oda is trying to portray here, at the very least, that at the moment he is painting the portrait of for us to then either find out the real story or whatever later, is this, kind of question of like, okay, how much of this is actually going to be, Loki being this terror, and how much of it is like, this is just hyperbole, and there was stuff happened and Loki tried to prevent it, but he's the one that got blamed for it in the long run. So there's that whole question. And they're just like, he had the authority of a prince and a malicious personality. He caused hell whenever the king wasn't looking. And again, calling in the king. And like the rest of the Straw Hats are all like listening to this as well, because it's like this would be a hard conversation to miss at the moment with everybody talking about Loki. And the ones who had been on the ship already with like that were on the Great Eric when they were, learning about Prince Loki, that's a little bit, they're a little bit more familiar with the story. And Jinbei's just kind of like got 3 dots and they're listening. And it's like, then finally, in that very castle, probably pointing up to like the castle up on the hill, Loki killed King Harald, the greatest monarch Elbath ever knew. For the time being, we are going to use Stoic the Vast from How to Train Your Dragon as the representation of King Harald until we get a better image of him. In this panel, we do get an image of what is a portrait of him that has seemed to have been cracked, so it might be like a photo or something like that of him that seems to have been cracked in some shape or form. But we don't get like a good enough picture of like what he actually looked like. Big, strong Viking, yes. Beyond that, don't know. But yeah, we're gonna use Stoic the Vast. I'm really excited about the live action How to Train Your Dragon. We'll see how that goes. Because I love How to Train Your Dragon, so we'll see what happens there. Loki is not Hiccup. And then they're just like, more praise upon Haldir. It's like a splendid wise man who tried to connect with the outside world, to get people to see beyond Elbath's feared reputation of a land of warriors. And this is something that we've been kind of, that's been going around in the fan base of like the question of like whether or not Harald was actually good and like was just very naive and trusting of the world government and trusting of like outside stuff without actually listening to any advice that was given to him by some of the others who like maybe had been pirates in the past, or if he was very much this actually an evil king and he was the one causing all these problems and then made Loki get the blame for them, but because Harald was the king and had this amazing reputation, nobody would believe him, or everyone would believe him when Loki got blamed that Harald didn't know anything about it. And that Loki was actually trying to like protect the kingdom from his father's wrath or from his father's stupid decisions or whatever. So those are like kind of the two competing things. Or it could have been like Harald was legitimately just like a very good king, but somehow Loki ended up being framed for his murder when he didn't actually kill his own father. Something I didn't point out when they were referring to the prophecy is that in regards to the prophecy that his son will kill him, at that time we know that Harald already had Hyrudine. So there's this comparison going on where it's just like, as everything is happening with this, Hyrudine is like seen as like the perfect little angel, and then Loki is just like the little terror child that's going on right now in that regard. And like one of the giants is pointing at Jarl, and he's like, Lord Jarl was stabbed trying to stop Loki. And it was like, we get like a better angle of like how the dagger is stabbed through Jarl's head, which any angle that a dagger is stabbed through your head is probably bad, particularly if it's stabbed through your cranium. But it's kind of more like a glancing blow, I guess, or like off to the side. So I don't know what's going on with that. And he's just like, my helmet saved me in the end. And Luffy's like, it didn't save anything. I think that Luffy is just like aware enough of like, knife to the head, bad. He may have learned that when he was a kid and got the little scar under his eye. But they're just like, Loki's reign of terror finally came to an end 6 years ago. He was running amok at sea when Redhair captured him. And Luffy's like, oh, Shanks. Luffy's like, someone said Shanks. Someone mentioned Shanks. Yay! He's like happy about that. He's just like, Shanks really came here? So he's just really happy about that. It's just like, yeah, in fact, he was just here earlier. I'm not sure where he went off to, though. It's like, yeah, we're not sure either at the moment. That's still left up for debate, where he went. At some point he went and tortured Bartolomeo, but other than that, we're not exactly sure what else has been going on for Shanks, besides showing up at Wano and scaring them out of Green Bull. But like, so Luffy's like happy about hearing about Shanks, and we kind of see this panel of Zoro going like, listening to like the, you know, being very, and if there's anybody around here, if there's any two people around here that are like experts in Luffy behavior, it is Zoro and Nami, and we're gonna see that in a second. Zoro, who's been around Luffy the longest out of all the Straw Hats, yes, not by much, but by like a day and a half or something like that before Nami showed up by the time they left Shell's Town and everything. But Zoro's like, at this. And then we cut to like the outskirts of the village, maybe a little bit later. And he's just like, I thought you were acting weirdly on edge earlier. That explains it. You realize he's a reviled Kingslayer, right? Everything he told you was obviously just a lie. And Zoro's just like scolding Luffy, and Luffy's like, he said he knew where Shanks was. Do you have any idea how badly I want to see him again? So Luffy's just like throwing a tantrum, which is just funny. And again, this is, you know, calling back to the whole thing of like, you know, since the end of chapter 1, Luffy has wanted to see Shanks again. And yes, we've had like at Marineford, Shanks showed up, but you know, Luffy was completely unconscious at that point in time, and so they technically met, but Luffy was unconscious, so it doesn't count because Luffy wasn't able to actually talk to Shanks and everything. And then Zoro was just like, yes, I heard about it 1,000 times. Sounds to me like he was using that to trick you. It's like, I like that Zoro was just like, yes, I'm aware. You've mentioned it a lot since I met you, how much you want to see Shanks again. It's like Luffy laying in bed in the men's quarters every night on the Mary and then on the Thousand Sun, just telling the rest of them, I was like, I can't wait to see Shanks again. I really miss him. It's like, the other Straw Hats are like, yes, Luffy, we know. Now please go to sleep. And Luffy's just still throwing a tantrum. How would you know? You've never met Loki yourself. Again, that's calling back to the fact that, like, there's, like, this whole thing going on right now where it's just, like, Luffy, to a degree, tends to be a pretty good judge of character. I was trying to think if there's been moments where, like, that hasn't been the case. Where it's, like, where Luffy has just been, like, a horrible judge of character and who he has trusted. And I'm like, I'm sure there's been some over the course of the last, 1,000 and 1,136 chapters, but I'm like, I can't think of anything specifically off the top of my head. He tends to be a pretty good judge of character. Once he, gets to know someone, or even initially when he meets them. Although he did initially fight Frankie. To be fair, Frankie had robbed them, so Frankie was picking a fight with him, so that's a bit different. But there's like some other bits here and there where it's just like, what other ones did like Luffy trust that he shouldn't have? I mean, like I mentioned Strong World earlier, and in Strong World they kind of trust Shiki initially, which kind of backfires on them. But that's kind of before Luffy has access to like his observation hockey and better senses and voices of all things and everything else like that. So there's some of that. And Zoro goes like, I haven't. I'm just guessing based on his reputation. And then we get like the little little cutaway to Loki. He's like, I'll tell you everything I know. That includes Red Hair's current whereabouts. How would he freaking know where Red Hair is? How would he know where Shanks is? And then Luffy is just like, if it really was a lie, I'm going to send him flying. So then Nami has then shown up. And it's the whole concept of like, if you're seeking off to do whatever I think you are, did you seriously expect to find your way there without me? It's also like you two would be lost without me. How are you two ever going to find your way to anywhere? Particularly if you try to use Zoro as a compass. That's going to be a horrible idea in that regard. So, and then we cut to where we have them on one of the falls or whatever, the cloud boats. And review's over an hour long already. I'm sorry. But they're on one of the cloud boats, And Road is the one rowing them on the cloud boat because they're too big, they're too small to make it work. But Zoro's like, listen up, Luffy, we'll get the key. But if he pulls anything funny, we'll have to take care of him. And Luffy's like, got it, thanks. And he's like, but why is this guy here? In regards to Road. And Nami's like, he's my new slave. And Road's like, I'm truly blessed. It looks like he's been freshly electrocuted as well. Because his hair's all frizzy and puffy and everything, and he's extra smoky. Extra scorched. And then we have Zeus is kind of scolding him, and he's like, don't forget, I'm her number 1 slave, and Sanji's number 2. And, oh god. Call back to everything that happened on Wano, in regards to what happened to Onigashima. Although, there's a whole scene where, like, Nami's talking to Zeus, like, after stuff has happened with Lin Lin, and he's, back on her side, everything. And she's like, I don't want a slave or whatever. How about a partner instead? So it's just like, that's better, but referring to slave here. Okay. And Road's like, strong girls really get my blood pumping. And I think it's Zoro that's just like, he's been struck by lightning, literally. Yeah. And Luffy still has like a giant thing of meat that he's eating right now, which is just funny. And then Road's like trying to lean into Nami, and he's like, Nami Tasso, isn't it neat that, or how we're both navigators? And he's like, don't ever try to get close to me again. Yes, ma'am. And Nami's like, it seems wrong for the guest of honor to bail so early, as she's looking at Luffy, and he's like, don't worry, I brought some meat. Have you tried this moose? Again, it's a dinosaur, but whatever. And Road's like, oh, they're all in a drunken stupor now. They probably can't remember what they're celebrating. Maybe. I like this that we're kind of getting like a callback to like the Romance Dawn trio, where we've got, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami. It's like we haven't had just like these three kind of, paired up together for a little while. It's almost always like the monster trio or something like that. But we have like these three together, which is nice. And, nice setup here for these guys, just going on this little mini side quest, I guess, to go get the key out of the castle. And of course, Nami's treasure brain is kicking into gear, and she's like, say, if all the treasure in the castle suddenly disappeared, would that be a problem, Rodo? And it's just like, my vision is awful, so I'm sure I wouldn't even notice. It's like, your vision is awful, then how are you a navigator? That seems like a pretty important thing for a navigator. And I think it's Zoro that's just like, you had this in mind since the beginning, didn't you, Nami? Or, well, Zoro or Luffy that says it, and she's like, huh? And she's got her berry eyes. Her money eyes. And it's just like, your eyes! I love that gag with Nami. So we cut away from now, and we cut down to the underworld area, the realm of the dead. And Loki is laughing, and it's just like, so that's what it is, huh? If I understand you correctly, then I'm afraid I'll have to step back and refuse your offer. And we, cut to Loki, and he's just like, I'm sure it's an honor to be invited to join your noble knights, but that would make you celestial dragons, right? Do you really expect anyone on Earth to willingly become scum like that? I don't know, we just had a whole arc where the main group that we were trying to help was betrayed by the one who wanted to become a celestial dragon. So, take your pick there, Loki. And we cut down to where we see where, Luffy had been, a couple hours earlier or whatever, depending on how long the party's been going on. And we see Hooded Shanks and Hooded Woman, who we're going to get a name for in a minute. And they're there, and they're talking to Loki, and it's just like, yeah, they gave him this offer to become a royal knight and everything. And he's like, yeah, no, I don't want that. And we have Hooded Shanks. Again, we're not getting a name for him yet. And he's just like, do we have any intel? And the woman's like, all the informants we sent to Elbath reported a giant crow heading for them before their transmissions got cut off. Their weakness is beyond belief. So this is referring to, I guess, any of the, Cypher Pull agencies that they would have tried to send to Elbath over the years to try to gather information about what's going on in the country, try to blend in the country or something like that. Those may be a good chunk of the people who are currently sitting in the diorama that Road built, depending on if they've been able to actually escape from it. So that's a possibility that some of those are, former, members of Cypherpole or something like that. They may not be like Cypherpole 9 or Cypherpole 0, but they might be, Cypherpoles like 1 through 8 or something like that, depending on the circumstances. So that's a possibility there of who they might be. And the world government has probably been trying to get someone back into Elbaf for the past, 65 years or whatever, since Lin made it that Mother Carmel had to leave because she was like their informant there. So it's like, well, we're going to have to see what we're going to do with this. We need to get someone else into the island, but they haven't managed to do that yet, or at least not very successfully enough that it's worked. And now we're going to get the kind of face reveal / physical reveal of the female God's Knight that we have here. And she's like, I'm done just standing by and listening. This is the definition of impertinence. And so we see her face first. She has a cap with goggles that kind of looks a bit like koalas. And she also has, we see like the bandages around like the bottom half of her face and everything. She's kind of got like the short cropped hair, at least as much as we can see. And she has hediochromatic eyes. So she's going to join the growing list of anime characters and manga characters that have hediochromatic eyes. I was trying to see if there had been anybody else in One Piece thus far who had hediochromatic eyes. And I'm like, I don't think so. Because like Uta has like the multicolored hair, has the red and white hair, but her eyes are both purple. And I'm like, I don't think there's any other characters in One Piece that have had hediochromatic eyes. So there's that. She's like, I won't let it stand. And so she's not happy about this. So we get the full body reveal. She's tall, slender, wearing kind of like a military-ish type jacket with like the long cloak type of a thing. She's got long sleeves, one of which seems to be able to turn into what looks like the bandages that she was using to attack the giant in the last chapter. And she also doesn't look like she's wearing pants, which seems to be a horrible decision in the middle of a snowstorm and the underworld on Elbaf. So she has no pants. She's got cool looking boots though that look kind of interesting. And she is God's Knight Gunko, Gunko is what she is referred to as. At least that's what her, Uta box says. And the hooded Shanks, who we still keep getting like shots of his face, but they're always covered on like on his side where we would normally see the scars. It's all covered. And it's just like, don't be hasty, Gunko. And then we see the giant black wolf that with the Fenrir wolf come out of the woods and is showing up and trying to attack them. And Gunko is just not fazed by this at all. She's just like, hey, stay back if you want to keep breathing. And like Loki's like, eat him, wolf. And she just releases like the bandage, arrow, cloth strip, whatever, just releases that, and it like loops around the wolf. She's able to like cut it off at one point using whatever power she has over the dang thing. It loops around the neck of the wolf, and then it pulls tight, and it's basically like, I'm not going to do the motion, but you get the motion, like a hangman, is what it's doing to the wolf and making it hang in midair. So its weight is pulling down on the rope and on its neck to choke it. And Loki's like, oh, wolf! So he's concerned about the wolf. Notice he hasn't seemed to have given any of these things names for the ones who are like his friends. Whatever. Luffy named all of his friends on Ruskaina and everything, and he named, Surume and everything, so there's that. Loki doesn't seem to have done it. And Hooded Shanks is like, if we were to spare him, would you change your mind then? And the rest of the dialogue in the chapter just belongs to Loki. And he's just like, so that's how you operate, huh? Well, if that was your offer, I accept my friend's fate and wish him peace in death. It's okay to grieve and rage, but a warrior never kicks and screams in the face of death. I will never understand that logic. I understand trying to protect people who you care about over your own life. But stuff like this I will never understand. But whatever, this is what the type of personality Oda's trying to paint for him. And the wolf seems to be dying. And Loki's like, I'll swallow all my fury and use it to fuel me when I reduce this world to rubble. So we have no break next week, so we're supposed to have a chapter next week, so that'll be fun. In regards to, I don't know what to say about what's going on here with Loki. I don't want the wolf to die, but it's like also like it probably will, or it'll be like passed out, and then Luffy and the others will show up and save him at some point in time. I don't know. Is it wrong that I want Luffy to have like a giant pet wolf? Is that bad? I don't know if Luffy would be able to take care of a giant pet wolf, but I think that would be an interesting addition to the crew. That'd be fun. But I don't know what to say about some of this in regards to like the warrior stuff, and like warriors don't beg for mercy or whatever. It's like, I don't know, but that's just the type of morality that Oda is painting here for Loki. And it's like, we'll see how that fits into like all of the other stuff that we've seen in regards to like what the other giants have said about Loki. I don't know where I fall if Loki's going to be one of the villains for the arc or whatever. From what we can tell with like Luffy and the others, Luffy, Nami, and Zoro, they're gonna go and get the key out of the castle, and then Rhodes gonna take them down to where Loki is currently tied up, and then attempt to free him, I guess, is the thought. And then if they free him and then he lies to them, they'll just kick his butt. Which between Luffy and Zoro, I think they would be just fine kicking Loki's butt. Don't know what Nami's gonna do in that regard. And as much as I know, Nami has definitely improved since the beginning of the story, particularly with having Zeus there in the climate attack and everything. I don't think she would be much of a match for Gunko. So we'll see what's going on with that. We'll see if any of the other animals show up and they just keep torturing them or whatever. Maybe they might try to start torturing Loki. I don't know. But Loki's like, I'll just swallow that fury and use it to fuel me when I reduce the world to rubble. And it's just like, if he is one of the ones who buys into the sun god being this emissary of destruction, then that's not a good thing. That's very not a good thing. Because doomsday cults with doomsday leaders have always gone so well. But yeah, so that's what we have here. I don't know what'll happen in the next chapter. I don't try to do predictions for that type of stuff beyond like we'll see what other giants show up, what they if Luffy and the others manage to get here at the end of the next chapter, or if they're gonna find like a clue in the castle or something like that as to what's going on. So we'll see what happens there. I get to go to a convention this weekend, so that'll be nice. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!